On the 25th of February, 1836, in a room on Broadway, 1,500 people paid 50 cents each to watch a surgeon cut open the body of a woman they had seen alive the week before. Her name was Joice Heth. She had been enslaved in Kentucky, and she was sold, not freed, sold, to two promoters in the summer of 1835. They sold her on to a 25-year-old showman who had never run an exhibition in his life. He advertised her as 161 years old, and as the woman who had nursed George Washington as an infant. Neither was true. The surgeon said so to the paying room. She was about 80. The showman's name was Phineas Taylor Barnum. He had sold her alive at 25 cents, and then he had sold her dead at 50. The body was always part of the deal. None of this began with Barnum. When he bought Joice Heth, he was joining a trade that was already a century and a half old. In England, it ran at the fairs, Bartholomew Fair in London, every August for 4 days in booths hired by the week. Matthias Buchinger was born in 1674, without hands and without feet, and grew to 2 feet 5. He played 6 instruments, he was a marksman and a magician, and he was one of the finest calligraphers in Europe. Look at the curls of the hair in his self-portrait. They are 7 psalms in the Lord's Prayer, written in miniature. He performed in front of kings for 40 years and never got the court appointment he wanted. Józef Borówski was carried round the courts of Europe by a countess as a curiosity, and he hated it. So he sold subscription tickets to his own concerts instead, and published his own memoirs, and sold those himself. Sarah Biffin was born without arms in 1784 and shown at the fairs under a canvas showcloth with her name on it. She painted miniatures with the brush in her mouth, took a Society of Arts medal, and ended up painting for 4 monarchs. That is the trade Barnum walked into, a booth, a showman, and one person being looked at. What he changed was the size of it. For most of the 19th century and a good deal of the 20th, a person with an unusual body could be bought, contracted, made a ward of court, or simply taken and then shown to the public for money. That trade had a supply chain, a press strategy, a wage structure, and eventually a workforce that organized. It is usually told as a parade of curiosities. It is better understood as a business. Barnum's first exhibit did not sell out, so he wrote to the newspapers. He wrote anonymously, and he denounced his own attraction as a fraud. The woman on Broadway, he explained to the editors, was not a woman at all, but a machine of whalebone and India rubber, worked by a ventriloquist. Attendance recovered immediately. He had worked out something that has not stopped being true. A newspaper will not print your advertisement for nothing, but it will print your argument for nothing. Within 5 years, he had bought a 5-story museum on the corner of Broadway and Ann Street, on credit, against the takings. The trade was about to become an industry. Barnum's American Museum took 38 million admissions before it burned. In 1842, he found a 4-year-old boy in Bridgeport, Connecticut, who had stopped growing at 6 months old. He named him General Tom Thumb and taught him to sing, to mime, and to impersonate Napoleon Bonaparte. Charles Stratton reached an adult height of 2 feet 11 inches, toured Europe for 3 years, and played for Queen Victoria. He also became rich enough that when Barnum went broke, it was Stratton who lent him the money. The hinge of this act is a piece of card. From 1859, the carte de visite let a performer be sold as a photograph, by post at scale. Barnum exhibited the Lucchese family, Rudolph, Antiana, and their son Joseph, all of whom had albinism, and billed them the Eliophobus family, meaning afraid of the sun. They were not afraid of the sun. It was a sales line, and Currier and Ives printed it, and Matthew Brady photographed them, and the cards went out across North America. On the 13th of July, 1865, the museum caught fire. Anna Swan, 7 feet 11 inches tall, was trapped on the 3rd floor. 18 men lowered her out of a window on a block and tackle. The fire put the business on the road, and the road needed a bigger story. So who were the men doing this? Barnum is the one everybody knows, and he is not the most disturbing of them. He was a marketer who worked out that a fight sells better than an advertisement. William Leonard Hunt performed as Guillermo Antonio Farini. He had crossed Niagara on a tightrope before he ever managed anybody. In 1882, a 5-year-old girl was brought from Laos to London and exhibited at the Royal Aquarium as the missing link. Farini adopted her and gave her his name. She was Krao Farini. She learned German and English, read in several languages, and worked the sideshows for more than 40 years. Theodore Lent is the one the record is hardest on. He managed Julia Pastrana, and then he married her. She died in Moscow in 1860, 5 days after their baby son, who lived 3 days. Lent had both bodies embalmed. Then he went back on the road with them and charged admission. Later, he found a second woman with the same condition and married her too. None of these men thought of himself as a monster. They thought of themselves as being in business, which is the part that should worry you. What the trade actually sold was not a body. It was a story about a body. William Henry Johnson was born in New Jersey. Barnum put him in a cage, billed him "What is it?" and sold him as a missing link found in Africa. He performed as mute for more than 60 years. His speech was entirely ordinary, and it is debatable whether he was intellectually disabled at all. Krao was 5 years old when she was taken from Laos and shipped to London. Her body was covered in hair. The showman told the newspapers that this child was living proof that Darwin was right. Maximo and Bartola were Salvadoran children taken from their parents and sold as the last survivors of a lost city called Iximaya. In 1853, the biologist Richard Owen examined them in London and said the story was nonsense. The promoters went on using it anyway. That is the standard the trade actually worked to. The story did not have to be true. It had to be unrefuted in the room, which is a very different and much easier thing. Captain Costentenus was billed as a man tattooed by force in Chinese Tartary as a punishment, 2 million needle punctures. He was a Greek Albanian who had chosen every one of them. He wrote the book himself and sold it at the door, and he earned $1,000 a week. And here the story turns, because the people being sold could read a contract. Millie and Christine McCoy were born enslaved in North Carolina, joined at the back and sold at 10 months old for $1,000. They were stolen, taken to England, and recovered by their mother, who crossed the Atlantic and knew her daughters on sight. They came home, learned 5 languages, sang for Queen Victoria, and kept what they earned. They died on the same Carolina land they were born on, which their father had bought back from the man who had owned them. Chang and Eng were joined at the chest and shipped out of Siam at 17. At 21, they sacked their manager and ran the exhibition themselves. They bought a farm in North Carolina, married 2 sisters, and raised 21 children, and by 1850 they owned 18 enslaved people, 10 of them under 7. This film is not going to resolve that, because it does not resolve. Annie Jones was put on show by Barnum at 9 months old. Her parents were paid $150 a week. She grew up to be the best-paid bearded woman in America, and she spent that standing trying to get one word out of the business. In 1903, the performers of Barnum and Bailey voted 21-11 to replace the word freak with the word prodigies. The management endorsed it. A workforce that can hold a vote is not a collection of curiosities, but the vote is also the high watermark, because the thing that ended this trade was not conscience. What ended it was that medicine took the exhibit indoors and the state took the turnstile. The same conditions that had filled a tent became case reports and teaching specimens. The paying room became the lecture theater. And a body that had been an asset became a specimen, which is a thing an institution can keep indefinitely and in good conscience. Julia Pastrana was billed across Europe as the ape woman. Hair covered her face. She sang, she danced, and she talked with the audience every night. She married her manager. She died in Moscow in 1860, 5 days after her baby son. Her husband had both bodies embalmed and went on showing them. They were still touring the United States in 1972. Édouard Beaupré was 8 feet 3 inches tall and lifted horses. He signed with Barnum and Bailey on the 1st of July, 1904, and died on the 3rd. His body was embalmed and displayed, found abandoned in a warehouse, and then kept by a university for decades. And then the state simply took the business over. The Dion quintuplets were born in Ontario in 1934, the first 5 known to survive being born. In 1935, the province made them wards of the crown by statute, took them from their parents, and built an observation gallery next to the nursery. It was called Quintland. 3,000 people came every day. Almost 3 million passed through between 1936 and 1943. Ontario made more than $50 million out of them. The trade had not ended. It had changed owners, and the new owner was respectable. What is left is a list of debts and the dates they were paid. In 1990, Édouard Beaupré was cremated and his ashes returned to Willow Bunch 86 years after he died. In 1998, Ontario paid $4 million to Annette, Cecile, and Yvonne Dion. In 2013, Julia Pastrana was buried at Sinaloa de Leyva, near where she was born, 153 years late. And in January 2023, the Hunterian Museum in London took the skeleton of Charles Byrne off public display. Byrne was an Irishman who came to London in 1782 and was paid to be looked at. He earned £700, and a pickpocket took all of it. He was dying, and he was frightened of the surgeons, so he paid friends to seal him in a lead coffin and sink him at sea. John Hunter bribed the undertaker and boiled the body instead. The skeleton was on display for very nearly 200 years. This film is not going to show it to you. It is fair to ask when this trade stopped. The answer is less comfortable than the question. In 1921, Florida made it a crime to exhibit for money any person who was crippled, malformed, or disfigured in any circus or sideshow where admission was charged. It sat unused for 40 years. Then, in the late 1960s, the state started enforcing it. So the sideshows went to court, and the people who brought the case were the performers themselves. One of the named plaintiffs was Stanislaus Barrett of Pittsburgh, who had worked for 40 years as Silo the Seal Boy. Their argument was not that the exhibition was dignified, it was that the law took away the only living they had and offered them nothing in its place. In 1972, the Florida Supreme Court agreed with them and struck the law down. Which is the argument Borowoski made when he sold his own tickets and Biffin made under her own showcloth, not that being looked at was good, that the money was theirs. Every one of these people was somebody's living. The argument of the last 2 centuries has been about whether that is the same thing as being somebody's property. Admission was 1 shilling.